Céad Míle Fáilte go Oughterard, and that means welcome to Oughterard in our native Irish tongue, which is Irish. Oughterard is situated approximately 25 kilometres from Galway City, between Galway and Clifton, which will be the next largest town. It is situated on the banks of the Oughterard River, which flows into Oughterard. Now, Oughterard is really the second largest lake in Ireland. The largest lake is Lough Neagh in Northern Ireland. Oughterard is a freshwater lake. It is very scenic, very beautiful, very famous for fishing. Oughterard means upper height. Now, if I translate it directly, Oughter means upper and Ard means high. So it will give you an idea that our area is high up and it's higher than the lake. The landscape for geologists, they love coming to this area because of the variety of landscape. The area of Oughterard is on limestone. Immediately after you leave Oughterard, you come into what's called granite country too. That is an igneous rock, and that is a much harder rock than limestone. So the area is very, very bare and bleak. So you can see the change immediately. You can see this lush green and rich pasture of Oughterard, and then you just leave the village and you come into granite country and you go straight into bog and barren mountain and wild landscape. And Oughterard is known as the gateway to Connemara. Now, bog would have been formed millions of years ago when you would have a huge amount of long grasses and water-loving plants like reeds and pine trees formed layer upon layer upon layer, and pressure came to bear on that then, and that's what formed the bog. We call it peat or turf. We call it turf around here, and everybody will burn turf. In this area, turf is burnt in an open fire. It has a peculiar smell that a lot of visitors like, and we particularly like it because it's very homely and it's nice to sit around an open fire. It is now cut by machine, but long ago turf was cut by it's called a slan. Now, it's very much like a spade with the side up, the side of a spade. That's a slan, and that had to be cut by hand. And then it was put into a wheelbarrow and it was spread out on what we would call the bank of the bog. It is just a flat space in the bog, and it was left out there to dry. And the long, warm, sunny days of summer would dry the turf. Now, the turf then, when it's dry, it's put standing in a small little, about 4 sods of turf are put standing together, and then it's stacked. Okay, and eventually you put it into a reek and then it's brought home. And it's left at the side of the house. Okay, and the wind can go through it and dry it more. So the drier the turf is, the better. Lots of lovely plants grow in the bogs. At the moment, the bogs are full of bog cotton. This is a white plant, and it's lovely to see the sea of white growing all over the place. And then there's a lot of medicinal plants that grow in the bog as well. Now, we do not use them today, but long ago the people would use a lot of the bog plants as cures, home cures for various illnesses. There's a lot of ritual attached to going to the bog because we would always light a fire when you go to the bog, and you would boil your kettle on that fire and you'd make the tea using the bog water. Now, people would say, disgusting, but it has a peculiar taste, and I suppose if you're working hard in a bog and you're thirsty, well, you're not too fussy about what you will drink. We as children liked the bog because we used to jump. It's very soft and spongy, so we would jump from bank to bank. We never wore watches because you didn't get a watch when I was a child until you were about 21. We gauged the time of the day from the sun, the position of the sun in the sky, but also from the trains. We had the 11 o'clock train and we had the 4 o'clock train. So you gauged before the train came and after the train came. So you had a fair idea roughly what the time of the day was. And in May we have a particular fishing season which we call the mayfly. fishing season, and that's very particular to this area, because in our lake at that particular time a natural fly breeds in the water, and that fly when it emerges from its larva on top of the water, it takes some time for the wings to dry out. The schools will close for this particular time of the year because all the children will go catching the flies, and they use a special box that has a hole on the top of it. And they catch the fly from the water and they put it in through the little hole on the top, and it has air holes at the side of the box, so that keeps the fly fresh inside in the box. Now they sell those flies to the fishermen, and one time they used to just get maybe about a cent a fly, but now the flies are not as plentiful as they used to be, so they can actually get €1 a fly. So they can make quite a lot of money. Now the first thing, usually in the olden days what they did was, a family that would be collecting flies, they would pool all their money together to buy a boat. So very often in this region, a boat would be bought by a family first instead of a car, because the boat could earn them money. And they could hire out their boat to fishermen. They could take the fishermen out in their boat and charge them a fee, and they could go fishing themselves. So they actually made money from their boats. Now the children would also use the money to buy their school books in September when they would go back to school, and parents would also use the money collected from the mayfly to buy the school uniform. So you can see that the mayfly is very, very, very lucrative to this area. Unfortunately, this mayfly season only lasts for approximately 3 weeks, then it's gone. Well, I came to Oughterard 40 years ago. I came from Dublin. I was teaching in inner city Dublin. The children at that time, the children I taught, were very, very poor, extremely poor in the area I taught in Dublin. Most of their fathers were in the army, and quite a few of them were unemployed. School was a special place for them because they all lived in what we would call flats too, and very often people had very large families. They could have anything up to 8, 9 or 10 children living in the flats, and very often a lot of the children wouldn't get proper sleep at night time. So when they came to school, the principal teacher, I was a young teacher at the time, and she said if they go to sleep in school, she said make sure that you allow them to sleep. So very often they would put their head down on the desk after lunchtime and they would go to sleep, and we would allow them to sleep because that might be the only right sleep they would have in that 24 hours. The children were fed in school. We used to give them bread and jam, and on one day a week, which was very special, they got a currant cake, and they always got milk. But when I got married, I left all that behind me and came down to teach in Oughterard, totally different from teaching in inner city. Now, no teacher at that particular time in 1975 wanted to go into a one-teacher school because they would have found it very difficult, and jobs were plentiful at the time. So my parish priest here in Oughterard was worried in case he wouldn't get a teacher and that the government would close down the school, and he didn't want that to happen. So he asked me if I would would I take up the position in Derryglen School, and I reluctantly accepted it because I really didn't fancy teaching in a one-teacher school. But I have to say it was one of the best decisions I ever made in my life, because I taught in that one-teacher school for 24 years on my own. I had 8 classes. I had to do 8 different maths programs, different English programs, history and geography, drama, music, PE. Now I have to say I didn't do really much PE because first of all I didn't have the facilities, and possibly I was too exhausted after the day's teaching to really cater for that. But I loved drama, and I loved local history, and I loved geography. And I took the children that would have been in an isolated area, and the children wouldn't have many experiences of going outside their area. So I decided that part of their education would be to bring them places. So I brought them every place. We went to Dublin, we went to concerts, we went to plays, we went on adventures, we went on school tours. If anybody had any talent in the area or anybody visiting the area, I always brought them into my school. So my school was open doors for everybody that could come in and contribute in any way to my education and to their education. I just retired 2 years ago after spending 30 years in that school. Now, I did get a second teacher for the last 6 years, and that was, fantastic, I have to say, and it made life much, much easier. People would often say, were the children deprived in a one-teacher school? And I would say, not at all. I think it was a great system of education because the older children helped the younger children all the time. The young child always had a minder in the school, and that was one of the senior children. So if the little 4-year-old wanted its coat tied or its flask opened or it wanted a word spelled to him, it went to its minder. It did not come to the teacher. So we had this system going that everybody helped each other out. And I have to say the older children learned how to do independent learning. They were able to go off and source material and research on their own. And in fact, some of my past pupils, one of them is in one of the public affairs programs in RTE, which is our national television today, and that's what he does. He researches. So I have quite a few of my past pupils are into research, and I'm very proud of every one of them, and I love them. I really, really love them. And I was blessed that I left my school without having a row with any parents, with any children, or with anybody in the community. And I just thank God that is the school that I taught in.